My own children called me senile and dumped me in a care home like spoiled food. But instead of crying, I bought the damn place and turned their little betrayal into the town's biggest humiliation. You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I swear every word is true. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I'm 74 years old. And 3 months ago, my children, my own flesh and blood, threw me into a care home, signed the forms, kissed my cheek like I was already dead, and walked away with smug little smiles. Why? Because they said I was too forgetful, too much to handle, too expensive to care for. But the real reason? Greed. You see, they wanted to sell my house. My husband's war medals. My vintage jewelry. Even my grandmother's piano. They wanted it all, and the only thing standing in their way was me. So they cooked up this perfect little plan to get rid of me quietly. Legally. Sanitized abandonment. The care home? A dim, understaffed building called Whispering Cedars, though there were no cedars, and the only whispering came from the mold in the walls. They thought I'd rot away there. That I'd forget my name, forget their betrayal, and die quietly in a corner. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I wasn't broke. Far from it. Back in 1992, my late husband and I opened a small offshore account after selling a successful vintage shop in Marseille. We never told the kids. Just kept it for emergencies. Turns out, betrayal is a hell of an emergency. So what did I do? I waited. Observed. Took notes. The facility was awful, nurses overworked, residents neglected, meals that looked like beige mush. I befriended the staff, especially a young nurse named Gracie, who'd been working double shifts and still treated the residents like family. One day, I asked her a simple question: if you could run this place, what would you change? Her eyes lit up. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to die here, I was going to own it. With my hidden funds and a little help from my old lawyer friend Arthur, who still owed me for keeping his secret about his Vegas wedding, I made a quiet purchase through a holding company. And just like that, Whispering Cedars had a new silent owner. Me. But I didn't stop there. I brought in new management. Fired the corrupt director who'd been stealing medication and replacing it with sugar pills. Hired proper cooks. Installed top-of-the-line security cameras. And best of all, I never revealed who I was. I pretended to be just another resident. I let my children think they'd won. Until the day of the family appreciation picnic. I had flyers made. A cheerful invitation, sent to every family whose loved ones were at Whispering Cedars, including mine. Come volunteer for a day of bonding and service. Give back to the people who raised you. My children arrived in designer clothes and fake smiles, ready for photo ops. They were handed mops, buckets, toilet brushes, aprons. And I made sure the cameras rolled. The whole town came. Even the mayor. Then, halfway through the event, after they'd scrubbed toilets, changed sheets, and served meals, I stepped onto the small stage at the center of the garden. In a clean suit. Microphone in hand. Hello everyone. I'm Eleanor Marsh. Resident, and now, owner of Whispering Cedars. The look on my children's faces? Pale. Shaking. Speechless. The mayor clapped. The audience gasped. But I wasn't finished. I turned to my children. This facility now has new policies, including a mandatory volunteer program for the families who abandon their elders. Starting with mine. Welcome to your shift schedule. They tried to argue. Said it was humiliating. Illegal. You can't make us do this, my son barked. I smiled. You're right. You're free to go. But I've already donated the proceeds of the estate sale to the facility's expansion fund. Your names are printed on every flyer. And oh, your tantrums? being live streamed. They stayed. You know what the wildest part is? The residents cheered. Nurses cried. Gracie hugged me so tight I thought she'd crack my ribs. And for the first time in months, I felt alive. Not just surviving, but fighting back. My children came to steal my dignity. Instead, I made them wear name tags that said volunteer, ask me about my shame. So no, sweetheart. I'm not senile. I'm strategic. And if you've got anyone in your life who thinks age equals weakness, just remember my story. Sometimes, the quietest woman in the room is the one who owns the room. If this story stunned you even half as much as it stunned my children, please like, share, and subscribe my channel for more real stories that bite back. And tell me, where are you from? I'd love to know which corner of the world you're listening from. You ever notice how people treat you differently when they think you're powerless? That was the real education I got at Whispering Cedars. Not in therapy sessions or afternoon crafts, but in watching how the staff behaved when they thought I was nothing but a dusty relic waiting to fade. Some of them were kind, nurses like Gracie, who wiped mouths and tears with the same tenderness. But others? They were wolves wrapped in pastel scrubs. I saw it all. Aides pocketing pills. Orderlies screaming at patients who couldn't remember their names. One woman, poor Dottie, was strapped to her bed because she wandered the halls too much. Not for her safety, but because she was annoying. Their words. Not mine. I sat in the rec room like a ghost, knitting quietly, observing everything. And you know what they saw when they looked at me? A senile woman with shaky hands and wet eyes. Someone who didn't notice. Someone who couldn't do anything even if she did. One staff member, a woman named Lorraine, once waved her fingers in front of my face and said, "Anyone in there?" I looked up, smiled, and said nothing. Because I wasn't ready yet. Behind the scenes, Arthur, my loyal lawyer friend, was finalizing the transfer of ownership through the holding company I named Hidden Cedar LLC. Poetic, right? While I played the role, Arthur handled the real business. We installed new security systems under the guise of donated upgrades. Every hallway. Every break room. Every nurse station now had eyes and ears. And every second of footage streamed straight to my private laptop, hidden behind a false drawer in my bedside table. I'd watch at night. Take notes. Track names. Smiles in the daylight. Monsters in the dark. And then came the staff meeting. Gracie wheeled me into the main lounge, she didn't know yet. Only Arthur and I knew. One by one, the staff filed in, thinking it was some boring HR briefing. That's when Arthur walked in with a thick folder under his arm, followed by a young man in a blue suit, Lucas, the new administrator I had personally hired. Young, sharp, and not afraid to fire anyone on the spot. Arthur cleared his throat. As of today, Whispering Cedars has been privately acquired by Hidden Cedar LLC. And the majority shareholder is in this room. Everyone looked around. Confused. Curious. Lucas stepped forward. Please direct all questions to Ms. Eleanor Marsh, seated here. You should have seen Lorraine's face. Pale as skim milk. She stammered, "Wait, the resident? She owns this place?" I leaned forward, real slow, smiled, and said, "Anyone in there now?" It was glorious. But I didn't stop there. I handed Arthur the folder. Show them. Inside were photos, stills from the security cameras. Dates. Times. Staff members caught mistreating patients. Some even caught stealing food and blankets. One male nurse was seen slipping his own mother sedatives to make her sleep longer. That one made Gracie cry. Lucas fired 5 people on the spot. Security escorted them out before they could scream or spin a lie. One woman begged, "Please, I need this job." And I said, "You should have thought about that when you let Mr. Kelly sit in soiled sheets for 12 hours. The next morning, the air inside Whispering Cedars changed. Residents whispered like revolutionaries. The staff who remained walked straighter. Gracie brought me tea, not as a nurse, but as an equal. "You really did all this?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm not done yet. You see, I still hadn't dealt with my children. The ones who started all this. The ones who had taken my house, emptied my bank accounts, told neighbors I was suffering from mental decline. My daughter, Janine, even posted online about the tough decision to place her mother in full-time care, like she was a hero. My son, Paul, had already moved into my home with his lazy girlfriend and started selling my antique china on Facebook Marketplace. I watched it all from a facility tablet. But what they didn't know, what they still didn't know, was that I hadn't just bought a building. I'd built a stage. And soon, I would invite them to step on it, right into the spotlight of their own undoing. Their reunion invite was already printed. Hand-delivered. With a note that read, "Come celebrate the matriarch who gave you everything. One day only. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty." Because their roles were waiting. In rubber gloves. And toilet brushes. And this time? Everyone would be watching. It was a Saturday when the trap finally snapped shut. The sun was out, the lawn freshly trimmed, and cheerful banners fluttered in the garden that read, "Family Appreciation Day, honoring the ones who cared for us." Oh, the irony. Staff wore crisp uniforms. Residents were wheeled out with sun hats and lemonade. And the local news van was already setting up its cameras, a heartwarming story of love and elder care, they'd been told. Gracie, now promoted to head nurse, winked at me as she passed by. She knew the truth. The only thing warmer than the weather was the revenge coming. I watched from the balcony in a soft lilac blouse, my hair curled, pearls at my neck like nothing had ever gone wrong in my life. But inside? I was fire. Paul arrived first. Wearing boat shoes, a smug grin, and aviator sunglasses like he was here for a golf tournament. "Mom. You look, well, alive," he chuckled. "Glad they've been treating you well." His girlfriend Trixie followed, carrying her little dog and a purse, already looking bored. Janine showed up 20 minutes late, of course. Loud and dramatic, hugging me with crocodile tears. "Oh Mama, I've missed you so much." I could smell the guilt under her perfume. I just smiled. "I'm so glad you're all here." Before they could get comfortable, Lucas handed each of them a clipboard. "Today's volunteers. Thank you so much for joining us. You'll each be paired with a staff member and assigned a rotation." Paul blinked. "A what now?" I answered for him. "You're here to give back, sweetheart. That's what this day is all about." And oh, the assignments I gave them. Paul? Bathroom sanitation. Janine? Laundry and bedpan duty. And little Miss Trixie? Kitchen compost and outdoor trash removal, with gloves that didn't fit her acrylics. I even made their name tags extra special. Volunteer, proud relative of Eleanor Marsh. I had them laminated. With glitter. Paul tried to back out. "This is ridiculous. I'm not scrubbing toilets." I stood, slow and steady. "Then you'll explain that to the mayor, who's arriving in 15 minutes. Janine turned pale. "The mayor? What for?" "He's our guest of honor," I replied sweetly. "He heard about how dedicated my family's been. He wants to feature us in his campaign newsletter." That shut them up. By noon, Paul was sweating like a hog, scrubbing urinals under the watch of Mr. Kelly, one of the residents who'd once been left in his own filth thanks to Paul's laziness. "Miss Eleanor," Mr. Kelly whispered, beaming. "I never thought I'd live to see the day." I patted his hand. "Neither did I." Janine cried twice while folding soiled linens. I made sure the camera crew got a close-up. "It's so dehumanizing," she sniffed. "Yes," I said gently. isn't it? At 2 p.m., I made my speech. Microphone in hand, I stood beneath the garden gazebo. Thank you all for coming. Today is about appreciation and justice. Because 3 months ago, these same children you see volunteering today told the court I was mentally declining. They said I couldn't manage on my own. That I needed to be placed somewhere safe. They stripped me of my home, my belongings, and most of my dignity. But what they didn't know was that I had one thing left. My mind. And my money. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The mayor looked shocked. The news crew zoomed in. I continued, voice unwavering, I bought this facility quietly. I rebuilt it. I protected the people they forgot. And today, I'm making sure they remember that blood is not thicker than betrayal. Paul tried to cut the mic. I handed him a bucket. There's a clogged sink in Wing B. You missed a spot. The mayor applauded. The crowd rose. Trixie tried to run, but slipped on her own purse dog's leash and landed face-first in a flower bed. I'll admit, I laughed harder than I should have. By evening, my children were exhausted. Humiliated. Their social media was flooded with photos. The tags? Hashtag family shame and hashtag reunion revenge. One tweet read, "This old lady just turned a nursing home into a battlefield, and her kids lost." As the sun set, Paul approached me. What now? You gonna keep punishing us forever? I looked him dead in the eyes. That depends. Are you going to pretend to care again, or are you ready to earn my forgiveness? He didn't answer. Just walked away with his head low. Back in my room, I poured a small glass of sherry and toasted to the one truth I've learned late in life. They thought I was disposable, but I turned their trash into a throne. 3 days after the reunion from hell, just when I thought the show was over, there was a knock at my suite door. Not the usual knock from Gracie or Lucas, this one was hard, deliberate, like someone arriving with a purpose. I opened it to find a sharply dressed woman with silver-streaked hair, thick-framed glasses, and a red leather briefcase clutched in one hand. Eleanor, she asked. Yes, I said, instantly guarded. Depends who's asking. She smiled like she'd been waiting years to meet me. I'm Victoria Blackwell. I used to be your lawyer's apprentice. Arthur sent me. Said it was time to update a few truths. I offered her tea, but she waved it off. She didn't come for tea. She came to deliver a file thick enough to drop jaws and possibly bank accounts. She opened the folder, pulled out a single sheet, and slid it across the table. At the top was my name. Beneath it? Power of attorney, current holder, Janine Marsh. I froze. Excuse me? Victoria nodded. Your daughter has been your legal decision-maker since the week after your hospitalization last fall. My blood ran cold. I remembered the pneumonia. The hospital stay. How Janine insisted she handle the paperwork because I was too weak to hold a pen. She filed these behind your back, claiming you were medically unfit. Her signature, your forged initials. Arthur suspected it but never had proof until now. She opened another file. Inside were notarized statements from a former hospital administrator who'd been bribed, plus video footage of Janine at the bank transferring a chunk of my retirement into her personal account weeks before the care home incident. I'll kill her, I muttered. No, Victoria said calmly. You'll outsmart her. You already have. I looked up. Explain. She handed me another form. This is a revocation of power of attorney. Already notarized. Arthur snuck in your thumbprint on the hospital records 6 months ago, just in case. You've got full legal power back. And best of all? She doesn't know yet. I stared at that document like it was a sword sent down from heaven. My own child had signed me into a care facility, forged my authority, emptied my accounts, and pretended to be my protector, all while smiling at church bake sales and calling me her poor old mama. But the game wasn't over. I hadn't just regained power. I had something better, time to plan her fall. Victoria leaned in. If I were you, I'd invite her back. Pretend everything's forgiven. Let her think you're slipping again. Then hit her where it hurts. The plan practically wrote itself. I would stage another little event. This time, a family financial forum, a fake seminar I'd host at the facility, inviting all residents and their families to learn about estate preservation and end-of-life planning. Janine loved money too much to ignore that invitation. And when she arrived? She'd walk right into a trap. Victoria would be waiting in the back row. Arthur would be on Zoom. And I'd have the original, unedited hospital footage projected on the big screen for all to see, her signing my name, her moving funds, her laughing with that banker like betrayal was a punchline. But there was one more thing. Something Victoria hadn't told me yet. As she packed her briefcase, she paused at the door and looked back. By the way, your husband's trust? The one everyone said was dissolved in probate? It's not. Arthur protected it. And it's worth double what your children think. They've been fighting over crumbs, while you're sitting on the entire pie. I sank into my chair, dizzy with rage and power. My children hadn't just underestimated me, they'd buried me alive, not knowing I had the shovel the whole time. As Victoria left, I whispered to myself, you gave my power to my daughter, Janine. But you forgot who raised her. And I'm not done yet. Do you know what real power feels like? It's not loud. It doesn't shout or swing fists. Real power is sitting in your chair, wrapped in a crocheted shawl, nodding slowly as your daughter speaks to you like you're 5 years old, and knowing you're about to burn her entire world down with a single smile. That's exactly what I did. The morning of the so-called financial forum, I wheeled myself into the rec room, looking as fragile as an old soap bubble. Hair messy, cardigan stained with fake tea dribbles, thank you, Gracie, eyes a little dazed. I practiced this look for 3 days, blank stares, long pauses, mumbling nonsense like, where's my cat? Is today Thursday? Let me tell you, acting senile is exhausting, but effective. I had a clipboard in my lap and an old pen with no ink. Gracie sat beside me, pretending to help me stay focused. The room was decorated like a retirement seminar, flyers with phrases like protect your legacy and family wealth planning made easy plastered across the walls. Residents and their families filled the seats. Cookies and tea lined the tables. And hidden in the back corner, behind a stack of nursing textbooks, sat Victoria Blackwell, ready with her files and a tiny camcorder. At 11 a.m. sharp, Janine strutted in like a peacock in pearls. She wore cream slacks, a gold watch I hadn't seen in years, my gold watch, and that fake smile she saves for cameras and creditors. Mama, she cooed, rushing toward me, planting a kiss on my cheek like I hadn't spent the last 6 weeks plotting her downfall. Oh, Mama, this is just wonderful. You're doing so much better. Who organized all this? I blinked, confused. Did you bring my cat? She laughed uncomfortably. No, silly, you don't have a cat. Oh, I whispered. That's right. I have a daughter who acts like a stranger. She stiffened. But the room was full, the cameras on, and she couldn't risk a scene. Come on now, let's get you situated. I'll take notes for you. Perfect. The presentation began. Lucas introduced the seminar, thanked the generous anonymous donor who funded this gathering, and welcomed the residents' families. Janine beamed. This was all my mother's idea, she said to the woman next to her. She's come a long way. We're proud of her progress. And then, the lights dimmed. The screen flickered on. And suddenly, the room was silent. Because the first image on screen was a time-stamped video clip of Janine, standing in a hospital corridor, whispering to a nurse, just sign it for her. She won't remember. She's confused half the time anyway. The nurse hesitates. Janine pulls a wad of cash from her bag and says, she'll be in a home by the end of the month. Let's just help things along. Gasps. The second clip, Janine at the bank, laughing with a teller, signing a check in my name. The third? Her taking selfies outside the care home the day she dropped me off, captioned freedom finally. She leapt to her feet. Turn that off. What is this? This is fake. I slowly stood, ditching the blanket, straightening my spine, clearing my throat. My voice came out crisp and calm. No, Janine. This is justice. The audience stared, stunned. I looked straight at her. You forged documents. Lied to medical staff. Stole from your mother. And today? You'll face the consequences. Victoria rose from the back and approached the stage. My name is Victoria Blackwell. I represent Ms. Eleanor Marsh. As of last week, all documents signed under fraudulent power of attorney have been revoked. Legal action has been initiated. And law enforcement has already been contacted. Janine's face crumpled in slow motion. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. But no words came. And then Paul walked in. Yes, Paul. My son. He wasn't supposed to be there. But somehow, he got wind of the event and showed up mid-speech. His eyes bounced from the screen to Janine to me. What the hell is going on? Victoria turned to him. You might want to sit down. You're in the next reel. Because yes, I had footage of him too. Selling my furniture. Kissing Trixie while promising her the deed to my house. Laughing as he listed my vintage piano for $200 online with the caption, "Old lady finally out of the way." I didn't speak for a moment. I let the room sit in that silence. Then I took the mic one last time and said, you all thought I was weak. Useless. Senile. But I've spent 74 years surviving war, marriage, grief, and raising 2 ungrateful children. This home? This event? This moment? Was mine. And from this day forward, you don't own my story. I do. Applause. Residents smiled through tears. Staff looked on in awe. My children stood frozen in their shame, their future crumbling one recorded clip at a time. And me? I never felt so strong. You ever watch your enemies try to smile while their lives fall apart in front of a crowd? It's a beautiful thing. The day after the Financial Forum massacre, as I started calling it, my inbox was flooded. Not from family, no. They were too busy panicking. I'm talking reporters. Columnists. Local influencers. Even a podcast producer who pitched a 6-part series called Senile No More. Apparently, word had spread that a 74-year-old woman had exposed her entire family during a fake seminar in a care home. And now everyone wanted to hear from me. So I gave them what they wanted. I called a press conference. Gracie helped me set it up in the newly renovated activity hall, now bright with flowers, clean tables, and fresh paint, funded by the secret trust my children thought was long gone. I wore my late husband's favorite brooch, styled my hair in soft waves, and sat beneath a banner that read, "When they took my voice, I bought a microphone." I opened with a smile. Good morning. My name is Eleanor Marsh. 3 months ago, I was declared unfit by my children, dumped in a care facility, and robbed of my home, savings, and legal autonomy. They called it love. I call it fraud. The reporters were already scribbling like mad. I continued. Let me be clear, I am not alone. There are thousands of elders across this country silenced, dismissed, and stolen from under the guise of care. Today, I'm here to say, no more. Behind me, Victoria clicked through slides, footage of Janine forging signatures. Screenshots of Paul's online sales of my antiques. Timestamps proving my health evaluations had been faked. Bank statements. Witness testimony. A copy of the original will that Paul had secretly tried to invalidate. One reporter gasped. Another whispered, Jesus. One raised her hand and asked, Ms. Marsh, why go public now? I answered without blinking. Because shame lives in silence. And I have no use for shame anymore. Another question, what will happen to your children? I leaned forward. They'll be fine. The court will deal with them. I'm not after revenge. I'm after correction. I lied, of course. I was very much after revenge. Janine had already been served papers, fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. Her social circle had imploded overnight. One of her best friends texted her, "How could you do that to your own mother?" She left our town 2 days later with her tail between her legs and a frozen bank account. Paul's girlfriend Trixie? She filed a police report claiming he'd misled her about ownership of the house. Which, technically, he had. She dumped him, took the dog, and moved back with her mother. Paul now lives in a rental apartment with water-stained ceilings and no dishwasher. The same man who once joked that Mom will be gone soon, and then I'll finally have a man cave now scrubs floors at a hardware store. As for me? I've been invited to speak at community centers, write op-eds or record a TED Talk. But most importantly, I've been visiting the residents of Whispering Cedars, one by one, helping them restore their legal rights. Gracie and I started a fund, the Second Voice Project. It's already helped 4 other residents reverse shady power of attorney transfers done by manipulative relatives. Turns out, I wasn't the only one betrayed by blood. And one afternoon, as I was wheeling myself down the hallway, one of the residents, a quiet man named Samuel who hadn't spoken more than 3 words since I arrived, stopped me. He placed his hand gently on mine and said, "You gave me my name back." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my revenge anymore. It was about justice, for all of us. But don't think I've gone soft. Because this war's not over. Janine and Paul may have been publicly exposed, but I've still got one more card left to play. A clause in the trust no one has noticed yet. One that will change everything about who inherits what, and who never sees a dime. And next week, I'll be reading that clause aloud, in a courtroom packed with cameras. The courtroom smelled like cold coffee and fear. Not mine, theirs. Paul and Janine sat across from me at the polished oak table, each flanked by their overpriced lawyers who looked more confused than confident. Janine wore a muted gray dress, trying to look demure. Paul looked like he hadn't slept in a week, his tie crooked and sweat pooling at his temples. I, on the other hand, wore royal blue, because grief doesn't live here anymore. Just strategy. This wasn't just about reversing the fraud or reclaiming my estate. That part was already underway. Today's hearing was about my revised will, my very public, very deliberate will. See, people like my children only understand one language, assets. You can humiliate them in public, expose them in church, make their names trend with hashtags like #FamilyFraud, but the only thing that truly rattles them is losing the fortune they thought they'd inherited. So I rewrote my will. And I made sure the courtroom was full when I read it. Arthur was there beside me, calm and collected, flipping pages like he was narrating a bedtime story with a twist ending. Victoria sat behind me, arms crossed, recording everything for my own archives, because receipts are powerful. The judge nodded and invited Arthur to proceed. He began, "Last will and testament of Eleanor May Marsh. Dated 2 weeks after the date of the forged documents submitted to this court." Janine's eyes twitched. "To my daughter, Janine Marsh, who once posted on social media that mothers are just speed bumps on the highway to success, I leave exactly $1, and the hope that she someday learns the value of loyalty over leverage." A stunned murmur rippled through the courtroom. Arthur continued, "To my son, Paul Marsh, who sold my belongings online while I was still breathing and referred to me in a text as a wrinkled ATM, I also leave $1, and the receipt for every antique he illegally sold under my name. May it remind him that some things, once broken, cannot be restored. Paul shifted uncomfortably in his seat, jaw clenched. But the best part? The remainder of my estate, including my home, personal savings, and trust fund of $4, $2 million, shall be donated to the Second Voice Project, a non-profit initiative dedicated to helping elderly victims of familial fraud reclaim their rights and dignity. Should any former beneficiary attempt to contest this will, they forfeit all legal standing and will be liable for court costs incurred by the estate. Gasps. Audible ones. A woman in the gallery dropped her purse. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is this accurate, Ms. Marsh? I stood, without help, and replied loud and clear, yes, Your Honor. Every word. They stole my voice. I'm taking their silence in return. Paul exploded. This is insane. She's not of sound mind. She's being manipulated. His lawyer tried to hush him, but he was unraveling. Janine started to cry. Loudly. For once, the tears weren't fake. The judge reviewed the documents, scanned the signatures, then looked directly at me. Ms. Marsh, I must say, this is highly unconventional. But not illegal. He turned to the siblings. You may wish to reflect on your actions. You've both been thoroughly documented. It was done. Final. Legal. Ironclad. And yet, there was one more surprise. As the court was dismissed and people began filing out, Arthur handed the bailiff a USB drive. This is for the press, he said calmly. At Ms. Marsh's request. The drive contained the full courtroom audio. My entire will. My words. My legacy. By nightfall, clips were going viral. A reporter on Channel 8 said, today, a local elder took down 2 children, 3 lawyers, and a legacy of silence, with nothing but receipts, resolve, and a razor-sharp will. They called me the matriarch of justice. Someone else said the Iron Widow. One TikTok had 2 million views and was titled, She Left Them $1 and a Lifetime of Regret. But to me? I was just Eleanor again. Free. Respected. Whole. Revenge has a flavor, and I'd just savored mine. But here's the thing about cornered animals, they don't retreat quietly. They lunge. And my children? They were panicking, broke, and humiliated. Which made them dangerous. It started with whispers. A nurse at Whispering Cedars told me Janine had been spotted in town asking questions about my mental health. Trying to dig up old records, find any doctor who might have said something vague, something she could twist. Early memory loss. Occasional confusion. Words that sound harmless in passing, but can be weaponized in court. She wanted to prove I was never of sound mind. That everything, the reversal of power of attorney, the new will, the public exposure, was all done under manipulation. Then came Paul. He showed up at the facility, pretending to apologize. Lucas met him at the gate. I watched from the security monitors as Paul handed over a bouquet and said, just tell her I'm here to make things right. Maybe she can reconsider her will? Lucas smiled politely. Ms. Marsh has reconsidered everything. Extensively. And shut the door in his face. But I knew better than to relax. The Apology Act was just a front. That same evening, Victoria forwarded me an email, an anonymous tip sent to her office. Attached was a screenshot of a post on some shady legal forum. Anyone know how to contest an elder's will? Especially if they're being coached by a lawyer? It was from a burner account. But the language? Too familiar. Too specific. Janine. They were planning a counterattack, accuse me of being manipulated. Turn the press. Cast doubt. Play the sympathy card. Maybe even sue the Second Voice Project, claiming I'd been coerced into donating under duress. Cute. Very cute. But you see, I own the battlefield now. And every trap they thought they were building for me, I had already mapped out weeks ago. First, the doctors. Before I ever changed my will, I asked 3 independent physicians, 2 from out of state, to run cognitive evaluations. Quietly. Thoroughly. Each one filmed. Each one signed and notarized. I even had one of them test me without telling me what he was doing, to make sure it couldn't be claimed as coached. All 3 assessments came back clear, memory sharp, reasoning intact, no signs of dementia. Next, the manipulation claim. Victoria had every meeting, every signature, every document, recorded with timestamps, audio, and legal witnesses. Each decision was made in a calm, structured setting. Every call was logged. Every conversation archived. I even narrated a video diary before signing anything. To anyone who might question what I'm doing, I know exactly who I am, and I'm doing this with full clarity. If that makes you nervous, good. And just for dramatic flair? I had Lucas upgrade the facility's security system to include facial recognition. Every time Janine or Paul came near Whispering Cedars, I got an alert. With images. And GPS logs. So when Janine tried to sneak in posing as a wellness counselor for a bogus company, I had the footage. Her in a wig. Holding a clipboard. Telling the receptionist, I'm here to check on the seniors. She didn't even make it past the lobby before being escorted out. You'd think that would stop them. It didn't. They got sloppier. Paul leaked my medical records, outdated ones from years ago, to a local gossip blogger, hoping to stir public doubt. What he didn't know. The blogger was married to Gracie's cousin. Within an hour, I had the draft email in my inbox. Thought you should see this, Ms. Marsh. He's trying hard. So I held a press dinner. A quiet, candlelit evening. Wine. Roast chicken. And at the end of the night, I stood, lifted my glass, and said, to those wondering if I've lost my mind, I assure you, it's quite intact. It's just no longer preoccupied with forgiving the unforgivable. The next day, the newspaper ran a headline, Eleanor Marsh, sharp as a knife, and just as dangerous. But the final nail? That came in the form of a cease and desist letter Victoria sent directly to both my children, along with a settlement clause, back off, or we release the footage of your attempts to smear an elderly fraud victim, including the wig, the forged emails, and the blog bribes. And just for good measure? We included a clause, if you challenge this will again, your names will be permanently added to a national database of elder abusers. A real one. With a link to apply for removal, after 10 years of good behavior. I waited 2 days. No response. Then I received a package. Inside were Janine's pearls. My pearls. The ones she stole after locking me in that room the day I arrived at Whispering Cedars. No note. No apology. Just a box. Paul wired back the last $8,000 he hadn't yet spent. Not out of remorse, out of fear. So now, my children are silent. And I'm more alive than I've been in years. But just when I thought the war was over, a knock came at my door again. And this time, it wasn't Victoria. It was someone with a letter. From my late husband's lawyer. A letter dated 5 years ago. One that could change everything I thought I knew. The knock came on a quiet morning, the kind where birdsong drifts in like lullabies and you almost believe in peace again. But peace doesn't last long in a life like mine. When I opened the door, a man in his 60s stood there, dressed in an elegant tweed coat, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope in his gloved hands. Mrs. Marsh, he said, voice gentle, almost regretful. My name is Everett Quinn. I was your husband's private estate attorney in Maine. I believe this belongs to you. He extended the envelope. My name, Eleanor May Marsh, was handwritten in my husband's unmistakable script. I stared at it like it might catch fire in my hands. I thought everything from Edward's estate had been settled, I stammered. Mr. Quinn gave a sad smile. That's what your children wanted you to believe. This letter was left with me 5 years ago, with instructions to deliver it only if you ever seemed in danger. And ma'am, when your name came up in the public court records after the will dispute, I knew it was time. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. I shut the door, sat down at my desk, and opened the last words my husband ever wrote to me. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means something terrible has happened. And it means I didn't protect you the way I should have. You were always the stronger one. Smarter than anyone ever gave you credit for. I've kept something from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I feared what our children might do if they knew. I believe you always suspected they were capable of greed. But I discovered something worse. 4 years ago, I found out Paul had accessed our joint accounts without permission. He used the funds to cover a debt tied to illegal offshore investments. Janine helped him hide it, posing as you to authorize the transfers. I didn't confront them. I hired a forensic accountant instead and froze what I could. But I knew they'd come for more. So I created a secondary trust. Not in your name. Not in mine. In the name of someone you loved. Our granddaughter, Lily. Everything I couldn't protect for you, I protected for her. Over $8 million is locked in a long-term trust under her name, safeguarded until she turns 25. Janine and Paul don't know it exists. They were too focused on the surface accounts. And the house. And you. They didn't just want your money, Ellie. They needed it. To bury what they'd already stolen. Please forgive me for not telling you sooner. I didn't want you to carry this burden. But if they ever hurt you, I knew you'd do what you always do. Survive. And fight like hell. Love, Edward. I sat there, stunned. Betrayal layered on betrayal. My children hadn't just abandoned me. They'd been actively robbing us, long before they threw me into Whispering Cedars. The care home wasn't just a convenient dumping ground, it was a cover-up. And Edward knew. My darling Edward, who had died with secrets in his chest and hope in his pen. A million thoughts screamed through me, but one rose above them all. They knew I'd find out eventually. That's why they acted fast. That's why they lied so hard. Gracie walked in just then, saw my face, and didn't even ask. Just poured me a glass of water and stood silently beside me. I have a granddaughter, I whispered, mostly to myself. Who doesn't know she's the sole heir to a trust worth more than all of this mess combined? Gracie leaned in, brows furrowed. Are you going to tell her? I folded the letter slowly, slid it back into the envelope. Yes. But not yet. Because now, I had leverage. Now, I had an untouchable fund. And now, I had the clearest motive yet, not just to destroy what my children built from lies, but to build something pure in its place. For Lily. For the future. And for the woman they thought they buried, who turned out to be the ghost that haunted their every lie. But first, I needed to make sure Janine and Paul never found out about that trust. Which meant a new plan. A deeper game. And a lie of my own. Revenge is powerful. But misdirection? Misdirection is divine. After reading Edward's letter, I realized something important. I didn't need to beat my children in court again. I needed them to beat each other. Because greed is a poison, and they were already drinking from the same cup. So I put on a new mask. The mask of forgiveness. It started with a phone call to Janine. Sweetheart, I said, letting my voice tremble just enough. I've been thinking. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I let the lawyers talk me into too much. I don't want to die with bitterness in my heart. Silence on the line. Then cautious breath. Mama, she said, her voice syrupy and slow, like she was trying not to spook a deer. You have no idea how long I've prayed to hear that. Liar. She wanted my signature, not my soul. I invited her to Whispering Cedars the following week for a private reconciliation lunch. I told her it would be just the two of us. But I'd already arranged for Paul to get the exact same invitation. Neither knew the other would be there. And of course, I wired the dining room with discreet cameras. I even had Victoria watching from a closed monitor in the admin office. Gracie made tea and set out the scones. And then I waited. Paul arrived first, dressed in that same wrinkled blazer he'd worn to court, trying to look respectable. He kissed my cheek, forced a smile, and gave me a gift, a framed photo of our family from 1998. I almost laughed. The last time we all smiled honestly. Then Janine walked in. And her face cracked the moment she saw Paul. You said it would just be me, she hissed. I told her the same, Paul snapped. You're playing us, aren't you, old woman? I shook my head and whispered, no, no. I just wanted us to heal. Don't you want to talk? Just talk? I reached for the teapot with a trembling hand. Just enough to sell the performance. Janine sat down slowly. Paul remained standing. You know, she said, glaring at her brother, you never returned the full amount. You sold half the china and kept the cash. Don't lie. I saw your car. Paul turned red. Don't even start. You were the one who lied about the hospital reports. You told me Mom wouldn't live out the year. You said, I said what you wanted to hear, she snapped. You were desperate, and I needed the money. But you got greedy. And you didn't, he barked. They were off like thunder. And I sat there, pouring tea, smiling. Every secret they'd tried to bury was now exploding in full view. Janine screamed that Paul had hidden accounts. Paul shouted that Janine had tried to blackmail the old doctor who filed my first mental decline report. She denied it. He called her a snake. She slapped the table. He threatened to sue her. I sipped my tea. You both said you loved me, I murmured, just loud enough for the mic to catch it. But I think you just loved what I could give. Janine wheeled on me. Don't pretend you're innocent, Mother. You changed the will to humiliate us. You let the press destroy our lives. You enjoyed it. Yes, I said calmly. Because you earned it. They fell silent. And then I dropped the real bait. There's a new fund, I said slowly. Your father left something I just discovered. But I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Their eyes locked. New fund. That was all they heard. Paul spoke first. You don't owe her anything. You know she manipulated everything. Janine whipped around. He'll waste it. Invest it in another scam. You remember what he did in 09? They began pitching themselves. Begging, softly, almost professionally. As if I were a board of directors they had to impress. That's when I stood and said, I need time to think. Please leave. They left. Furious. Suspicious. Silent on the way out, but seething. I knew what would happen next. They wouldn't just fight me. They'd fight each other. And that's exactly what they did. Within days, Janine had filed a private suit accusing Paul of financial fraud, claiming he'd misled her into signing documents on my behalf years ago. She framed it like she, too, had been taken advantage of. Paul retaliated by sending investigators to her old clinic job, accusing her of falsifying prescriptions and coaching elderly patients on how to lie during capacity assessments. It was war. And I was out of it. Officially. Victoria and I issued a public statement. Ms. Marsh has decided to recuse herself from all further litigation involving her children. She wishes them both healing, resolution, and privacy. That statement was picked up by the Globe with the headline, Matriarch bows out, while children rip each other apart. I watched it unfold like theater. Because what they didn't know, what they'd never know, was that the new fund didn't belong to either of them. It was hidden, untouchable, and sealed away under the name of a granddaughter they hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Lily. My Lily. The one they once forgot at school pickup because they were too busy closing a deal. And she? She was coming home soon. And I was going to tell her everything. Lily always had her mother's eyes, but none of her cruelty. She was 13 when Janine shipped her off to boarding school under the pretense of academic excellence, but I knew the real reason. Janine didn't want her daughter seeing what she was becoming. She didn't want anyone around to witness how far she'd fallen behind the curtain of perfection. Lily was inconvenient, too curious, too warm, too good. So she was tucked away like a forgotten photograph. But Lily was 17 now. And the moment I laid eyes on her again, standing in the doorway of Whispering Cedars in a faded denim jacket and Converse sneakers, I felt something crack open in me that had been locked tight since Edward died. She looked unsure, hugging herself, her copper curls wild from the wind. "Grandma," she asked quietly. "Gracie called and said you needed to talk?" I opened my arms, and for the first time in years, she ran to me. I didn't cry. Not yet. We walked through the garden together. I had Gracie prepare Lily's favorite, peach iced tea with too much sugar and a slice of lemon so thin it was practically transparent. "You remembered," she said softly, looking down into the glass. "Of course I did," I whispered. And then I told her everything. Not all at once. Not like a weapon. But slowly. Gently. I told her how her mother and uncle had tricked me. How they'd used my illness and grief against me. How they sold my memories one antique at a time. And then, finally, I told her about her grandfather's letter. About the hidden trust. About how she was the sole beneficiary. Her hand froze mid-sip. "Me," she whispered. "Why me?" I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Because Edward knew. He saw the storm coming. And he knew you were the only one worth saving. She sat back in silence, her throat working as she tried to find words. "I always thought Mom just didn't like me. I thought I was broken." "No, baby," I said. "You weren't broken. You were just inconvenient to people who only loved mirrors." She cried then. Real, silent tears that broke me more than any courtroom ever could. I wiped them away with the edge of my sleeve and said, "You don't have to do anything with it. Not yet. You're still young. But I want you to know what you came from. And what you deserve." She nodded. Then took a long breath. "What if they come after me now?" I smiled. "They won't get close. Not while I'm still breathing." But I could see the fear behind her eyes. Not of the money. Not of responsibility. But of her own mother. Of the ghosts that had raised her. So I gave her something else. The tapes. The security footage. The courtroom audio. The press conference clips. All compiled into a private, encrypted file. I told her, "You don't have to watch it now. But one day, when you're ready, you'll see the whole truth. The truth they tried to erase." She nodded, still clutching the USB like it was a holy relic. We sat in the garden until dusk. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't beg for trust fund details or credit cards or new clothes. She just held my hand. And before she left, she said something I'll never forget. "I don't want their money, Grandma. I want your legacy. I want to build something clean. Something you'd be proud of." I hugged her tighter than I ever had anyone. "Then you already have." As she walked away down the stone path, she turned back and smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It was a woman's. The kind of woman I had once been. The kind her mother could have been, if greed hadn't rotted her from the inside. I sat under the stars that night and realized something important. My story wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about inheritance, not of money, but of strength. And Lily was going to carry that strength farther than I ever could. But as fate would have it, my enemies weren't done yet. The next morning, I received a letter. From Paul. A letter that said just 5 words, "You missed one secret, Mom." The letter came folded in thirds, no envelope, no return address, just those 5 chilling words scribbled on the outside, "You missed one secret, Mom." It arrived in the morning mail, tucked between a flyer for a mobility scooter and a sympathy card from a stranger who'd seen me on YouTube. The handwriting was unmistakably Paul's, blocky, arrogant, leaning forward like it had something to prove. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want to open it. I knew it would stain something permanent. But I did. And what I read cracked the foundation of everything I'd rebuilt. "Dear Mother, I know you think you've won. You've humiliated us, exposed us, and thrown us to the wolves. Fine. Maybe we deserved it. But before you dance too hard on our graves, you should know, Dad wasn't who you thought he was. The offshore fund? The one you thought you and he built together from that antique shop in Marseille? It wasn't built from your business. It wasn't even legal, at least not at first. Dad was laundering money for a client back then. Some big French investor with dirty hands. He kept it hidden from you by funneling it through a dummy business account under your name. I didn't find out until after he died. There were old emails. Codes. Notes he left for his attorney, Everett Quinn. I think that's why the fund was always off limits. Why he made it hard to trace. So, while you're busy handing over millions to Lily, maybe double-check what kind of money you're passing on. Because if the IRS gets wind of it, her legacy could become a liability. And for what it's worth. I didn't do everything Janine did. I made mistakes, yes. But this one? This blood on the money? That's his. Sleep tight. Paul ****. I sat there frozen, the paper trembling in my fingers. My first instinct was fury. How dare he try to smear his father to save his own name? But Paul was many things, spoiled, selfish, careless, but he wasn't a liar when it came to protecting himself. If he was saying this, it meant he had something. And worse? He wanted me to look. I called Victoria immediately. She came within the hour, wearing her usual calm-like armor. I showed her the letter, my voice barely steady. She read it silently, lips tight. "We need to verify this," she said without looking up. "If he's right, there could be consequences. Old ones. International ones." But the trust was restructured legally, I whispered. Arthur revalidated everything with offshore compliance last year. Yes, she nodded. But if the origin of the money was criminal, even decades ago, it can still be contested. Especially by foreign entities. Especially if anyone has proof. My heart sank. Because if this was true, then the fortune Edward left behind wasn't just stained, it was vulnerable. And worse yet. Lily could be dragged into something none of us saw coming. "Do you trust Everett Quinn?" Victoria asked. "I used to," I said. "But now? I don't trust anyone who spoke to my husband without me." Victoria made 2 calls. Then 3 more. Within hours, we had a scanned folder, Edward's handwritten business notes from 1992, hidden among files Everett had kept for reference. There, in tiny French shorthand, were 3 initials, CG, and a payment chain linked to a dummy firm in Monaco. The name meant nothing to me. But it meant everything to Victoria. "Claude Giroux," she said grimly. Convicted in 1995 for financial racketeering across Europe. Multiple shell companies. Offshore laundering. Edward's partner? Not his partner, I whispered. His client. Suddenly, the pieces began to shift. Edward had always been evasive about that last year in Marseille. We'd made decent money at the shop, sure, but not millions. And that account? That had always felt like a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was a mess. A hidden one. A dangerous one. Can it be traced back to me? I asked. Victoria hesitated. Unlikely. But to be safe, we'll reassign the trust. Quietly. Layered through charitable umbrellas. Protected under U.S. compliance. It'll take time. But we can bury it deeper than Paul ever imagined. I exhaled. It wasn't over. Edward, my Edward, the man who I thought had left me a sword to fight with, had also left behind a landmine. And now, the clock was ticking. Because if Paul had this information, who else did he tell? I sat in the window that night, watching the wind ripple through the trees. Lily was safe, for now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the war had only just begun. Because secrets like this? They don't die quietly. The first sign came wrapped in comfort, banana bread. Gracie brought it to me one afternoon, still warm, the scent rich with cinnamon and deception. Dropped off by a visitor, she said cheerfully. Didn't leave a name. Just said, tell Eleanor, some things aren't forgotten. My gut twisted. I hadn't told anyone what Paul had written. Not about Edward's past. Not about Claude Giroux. Not even about the fund's shaky origin. But now someone else knew. And they were sending me a message, in the form of my mother's recipe. Only one other person in this world knew that banana bread meant guilt. And her name was Margot Bellamy. My oldest friend. My one-time business partner. And the godmother to my children. The woman who sat next to me at Edward's funeral, dabbing at my tears with a silk handkerchief. The same woman who, 15 years ago, lost her husband in a boating accident and moved to Charleston to start fresh. The same woman who had once told me, after too much wine, if I didn't love you so damn much, I'd steal your life. It wasn't a joke. Not anymore. Victoria confirmed it 3 hours later. I pulled a record on that anonymous wire. Paul used to leak your financials, she said, placing a thin file in front of me. The account it originated from? Belongs to a trust, recently amended. Co-signed by Margot Bellamy. My stomach dropped like a stone. She's backing him? I asked. Worse, Victoria said. She's bankrolling him. It was surreal, trying to reconcile the Margot I knew with the woman quietly financing my downfall. She had always been close to Paul. She'd called him her little prince growing up. Took him on trips, spoiled him while Janine sulked. But this? Helping him dig into Edward's past? Helping him weaponize it against me? I stared out the window of my suite at the rose bushes we had planted last spring. Why? Victoria didn't answer. She didn't have to. Some betrayals don't come from need. They come from envy. From watching someone else's life bloom while yours wilts. And Margot had spent 3 decades in my shadow, politely, quietly, bitterly. And now she was pulling strings behind the scenes, funding Paul's legal efforts, spreading whispers about tax fraud, and attempting to petition the court for an injunction against the trust Edward left for Lily. Their claim? That I was laundering criminal proceeds through a minor. But Margot made one mistake. She underestimated how far I'd go to protect my granddaughter. I had Gracie retrieve the old guest logbook from Whispering Cedars, every name, every date. And there, on the same day the banana bread arrived, was the name Margaret Bell. Clever. Subtle. But not enough. The camera at the entrance caught her face. I watched the footage in silence. There she was, in a beige coat, oversized sunglasses, leaving the bread at the desk, smiling at the receptionist. That's when I decided I wouldn't just fight back. I'd ruin them both. Paul for his cowardice. Margot for her betrayal. And I wouldn't use lawyers this time. I'd use Margot's biggest weakness, her obsession with image. Margot had just been nominated for the board of a prestigious historical foundation, the Charleston Preservation Trust. A powerful, donor-heavy group that prided itself on legacy, integrity, and spotless public record. And I had evidence. I had footage of her delivering that bread. I had voice messages from years ago where she joked about the taxman never finding the French account. I had screenshots of her forwarding my personal records to Paul. I even had an old email chain where she referred to Lily as a spoiled seed born from rotten fruit. And now? I had an invitation to speak as the guest of honor at the next Charleston Preservation Gala. Oh yes. She had no idea. Because while she licked her lips thinking about dragging my name through the mud, I was already crafting my speech. And this time, I wouldn't just expose betrayal. I'd do it in pearls and applause. The night of the Charleston Preservation Gala shimmered with wealth, history, and lies, mine included. I arrived in a black velvet gown stitched with silver thread, the same one Edward bought me for our 30th anniversary. Around my neck, I wore the old pearl choker Margot had once envied so openly. She spilled wine on my blouse to make me take it off. That night, I made sure it gleamed under every chandelier. Gracie pushed my chair through the grand marble foyer, past pillars and oil paintings and the clinking of champagne glasses. Everyone smiled. Everyone whispered. I knew why. By now, my name had become legend, the grandmother who destroyed her greedy children. But tonight, I wasn't here to settle family scores. I was here to make Margot Bellamy disappear from polite society. She stood at the far end of the ballroom, dressed in royal blue silk, flanked by Charleston's elite. Her hair pinned in that tight, perfect twist she always wore to hide her age. Her smile? A blade in velvet. She hadn't seen me yet. But when she did, her champagne glass dipped an inch. Just enough for me to see the panic flicker in her eyes. Mrs. Eleanor Marsh, the MC announced through the microphone, is a woman who's redefined what legacy means. She's not just a preservationist of buildings, but of truth. Please welcome our guest of honor. Applause. Margot's clapping was tight. Brittle. I rolled onto the stage slowly, deliberately, every pair of eyes tracking me like I was about to perform a miracle or a murder. I adjusted the mic, looked across the audience, and smiled. Good evening. Before I begin, I want to thank the Preservation Trust for inviting me tonight. It's an honor to be recognized not for surviving, but for speaking. Because silence, I paused, has ruined more homes than fire ever could. Margot's jaw tensed. I was married for 51 years, I continued. I raised children who later tried to erase me. I was institutionalized under false pretenses. Robbed. Humiliated. But tonight, I'm not here to talk about my family. I turned toward Margot. Looked her dead in the eye. I'm here to talk about my friends. A murmur rippled through the room. Some friendships are gardens. Others are weeds dressed as flowers. You tend to them. You trust them. And one day, they wrap around your ankles while you're drowning and call it love. Margot took a shaky sip of her drink. I had such a friend once, I said, louder now. She baked banana bread the day she betrayed me. Funded a smear campaign against me through a third-party account. Co-signed financial sabotage. Shared confidential documents with my enemies. All while applying to sit on the board of this very foundation. Gasps. The room was holding its breath. I pulled a remote from my purse. The screen behind me lit up. Slide 1, a still image from Whispering Cedar's front entrance camera, Margot, sunglasses on, handing off the banana bread. Slide 2, a scanned email with her signature, forwarding my court transcripts to Paul. Slide 3, a voice memo, played aloud through the speakers. Margot's unmistakable voice saying, "The IRS won't look twice if it's buried under Eleanor's name." The silence broke like glass. Margot stood. This is slander, no, I said, calm as glass. This is evidence. Her face drained of color. The board chair leaned toward her, whispering harshly. One woman dropped her napkin. Another pulled out her phone. I turned back to the microphone. You may still accept her onto your board. That is your right. But know this, if you do, you're welcoming the rot behind the gold leaf. And the whole town will know. I rolled back from the stage without waiting for applause. None came. Just stunned silence. And then, a slow ripple of whispers like a forest catching fire. Margot fled before dessert. By midnight, she had resigned. By morning, the headlines read, Eleanor Marsh strikes again, gala turns into exposé of socialite sabotage. And me? I slept like a baby. Because one more snake had been cut from my garden. But just as I settled into that peace, a call came in. From Everett Quinn. He sounded shaken. Eleanor, he said, you need to come to the office. Now. Why? There's something in Edward's archive I missed. A second letter. Pause. And Eleanor, it's not about money. It's about Lily. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. Not after Janine's betrayal. Not after Paul's schemes. Not even after Margot tried to burn down what was left of my name. But I was wrong. Because when Everett Quinn looked at me that morning, with those bloodshot eyes and that trembling hand clutching a sealed envelope, I knew something was coming. And for the first time in months. I didn't want to know what it was. We sat in his private office, the curtains drawn, the room lined with thick wooden bookshelves that smelled of time and dust and consequences. He placed the envelope on the table between us like it was made of dynamite. This was filed inside Edward's safety deposit box, Everett said quietly. It was mislabeled under a land title. I only found it when reviewing deeds for Lily's trust. I opened it. I had to. I nodded, fingers numb. And? He slid it toward me. It's addressed to you, but it's about her. My throat closed. I hadn't touched the envelope yet. Everett stood. Take your time. I'll wait outside. I stared at the handwriting. Same as the first letter. But different somehow. More rushed. Angled. Like his hand was shaking when he wrote it. Then I opened it. My Eleanor, there's something I need to tell you before the clock runs out. I don't know if I'll have time to explain it the way I should, and maybe that's my curse, to leave you with questions I never had the courage to answer. You know how much I loved Lily. But there's something you don't know. She's not Janine's child. At least, not by blood. Years ago, after one of Janine's many breakdowns, she confessed to me that she'd faked her pregnancy. Her marriage was falling apart, and she was terrified Paul would get all the family attention and inheritance. She found a young girl, barely 18, working at a clinic, scared, pregnant, and alone. Paid her under the table to hand over the baby and disappear. I didn't know what to do. I was furious, yes. But the moment I held Lily in my arms, something changed. I saw your smile in her. I saw you. And I made a decision that I know was wrong, but felt right. I forged the birth certificate. I filed the paperwork to make it legal. And I never told you. I kept it from you because I didn't want to take that baby away from our family. I knew you'd love her no matter where she came from. But I also knew Janine didn't deserve her. She never treated her like a daughter. Not the way you did. I left everything to Lily not just because she was good, but because she was yours, Eleanor. Maybe not by law, not by blood, but by something stronger. I just needed you to know the truth before it found you the wrong way. Protect her. Love her. She's your legacy now. Edward ****, I couldn't move. My hands shook so violently I dropped the letter. My vision blurred. My ears rang. Lily wasn't Janine's? That poor girl, used as a pawn in a power game before she even had a name. And Edward, my Edward forged records to protect her? Lied to me, and yet saved me all at once? I felt everything at once: rage, sadness, relief, fear, guilt. But above it all, love. Because Edward was right. From the moment I first held Lily, she was mine. And now I understood why. I picked up the letter and walked out of Everett's office. "Get Victoria on the line," I said, voice shaking but clear. "And Gracie. And Lucas. And Lily." Everett blinked. "All of them?" "Yes," I nodded. "We're done reacting." I looked out the window as the Charleston skyline shimmered in the morning haze. "Now, we start protecting." Because Paul and Janine thought they were hunting an old woman alone in a chair. They had no idea they were trespassing in a fortress built of secrets, steel, and survival. There are moments you rehearse 1,000 times in your head, trying to shape the perfect words like clay, soft enough to be held but strong enough to survive impact. But nothing, can prepare you to tell a 17-year-old girl that everything she knows about her own birth is a lie. I invited Lily to Whispering Cedars on a Tuesday. The garden was quiet, the air heavy with jasmine and something unsaid. Gracie brought out lemon tarts, just like Lily used to love when she was small. I could barely eat. She noticed immediately. "Grandma," she said, placing her napkin down gently. "You look scared." I took a breath. "I am." She tilted her head. "Is it about the trust? Or Mom?" I shook my head. "It's about you. And the truth I never knew I was keeping." She frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. I reached into my purse and pulled out Edward's second letter, already copied and retyped, word for word. I passed it across the table. "Please read this. All of it." "I'll wait." She hesitated, then took it. The silence stretched long and slow as her eyes scanned the page. I watched her jaw tighten. Her fingers grip the edge. Her eyes, my eyes, begin to blur. She finished. Folded it. Sat completely still. I didn't speak. I just waited. And then, in a voice so small it could have shattered me, she asked, "So? I'm not her daughter?" "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "Not by blood. But by name. By paper. By a lie your grandfather made to protect you, and, I believe, to protect me." Lily stared at her hands. "So who am I?" I reached across the table and held her wrist. "You are mine." Her lip trembled. "You are the little girl I read bedtime stories to when Janine was too tired. You're the one who asked for my wedding veil when you were 6 and said you'd wear it someday. You're the one who danced barefoot in my kitchen while I baked. You are not defined by Janine's selfishness. You're defined by the love you've been given. And the love you give back. And if blood means more than that, then I don't want it." Lily looked up at me. "I always wondered why she hated me," she whispered. "Why she never looked at me the way other moms looked at their kids. I thought I did something wrong." My throat closed. "You did nothing wrong." She stood up suddenly and walked toward the rose arbor. I followed slowly, heart pounding. "Are you angry?" I asked. She turned back to me, her hair catching the wind. "No," she said. "I'm free." I blinked. "What?" "I'm free," she repeated. "From her. From the story she wrote around me. If I'm not her daughter, then I don't owe her my silence. Or my forgiveness. Or anything." I felt my knees go weak, and I sat on the bench beneath the arbor, tears slipping down my cheeks. Lily knelt in front of me and took both my hands in hers. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said. "And thank you for being my real mother." And I broke. I wept like I hadn't in years. Because I had feared this moment would fracture us. Instead, it forged us. That night, I called Victoria. She knows, I said. And, she asked. She chose me. Victoria exhaled. Then we moved forward. We began transferring the trust, not to Lily as Janine's heir, but as a private beneficiary under my guardianship. The legality was delicate. But doable. And now airtight. But then, Victoria said something that chilled me. We've handled the legal end. But Eleanor, there's one more problem. What? Paul has proof of the original birth certificate. The one Edward forged. He could argue Lily was never legally yours to protect. If he releases that, the court could launch an investigation into fraudulent guardianship. He's playing a long game now, waiting for you to slip. I went cold. So what do we do? Victoria's voice darkened. We find the woman who gave Lily away. The biological mother. We find her before Paul does. Because if he found her first, he could spin her into a weapon. And Lily's entire identity, our truth, would unravel all over again. We didn't have a name. Just a year. A clinic. A whisper of a deal made in shadows nearly 2 decades ago. But Victoria is relentless when truth is on the line. Within 48 hours, she had unearthed a forgotten intake record from a women's health center in Savannah. 2007, an 18-year-old named Nina Ray Calder, listed as a walk-in patient during a late-term pregnancy. No insurance. No emergency contact. And one chilling annotation in the corner of the form, private transfer. Infant not held. We followed the thread. A shell bank deposit matching Janine's account. A withdrawal made by an attorney, Margot's attorney. And a signature authorizing the release of the newborn. Edward's. Not Janine's. Not Nina's. Edward's. He had orchestrated the adoption himself. Quietly. Legally gray. With no paper trail back to Janine. But Nina Ray Calder? She was real. And Victoria found her. Living in Asheville, North Carolina. Working as a baker. Quiet life. No social media. A woman who once gave up her child and disappeared like smoke. Until now. I didn't want to send anyone else. This conversation had to be mine. So Gracie and I made the drive of me in the passenger seat, the letter in my lap, and my heart heavier than ever. When we arrived, Nina opened the door before we could knock. She looked young, but tired in a way that only time and grief could shape. Her dark hair was streaked with gold, pulled back in a braid. Her eyes were green, Lily's green. And the moment she saw me, she exhaled slowly. I knew this day would come, she said. We sat in her kitchen. There was flour on the counter, sugar on the floor, a tray of scones cooling near the window. I didn't know who you were back then, she said. The woman he mentioned. Edward. He said he and his wife were good people. Said the baby would have a better life. I was scared. My family had thrown me out. The father was long gone. I had no job, no plan. And I just wanted out. I nodded gently. You were a child. She wiped her palms on her apron. He gave me $10,000. Told me to leave Savannah and start over. He said I'd never be contacted again. That it would be clean. Private. And it was, I whispered. Until now. She nodded. I used the money to go to culinary school. Moved here. Built a small life. I never married. Never had another child. She looked away. I thought it would be easier if I didn't. I reached into my purse and placed a single photograph on the table. Lily. 17. Laughing. barefoot in the grass behind whispering cedars. Holding a lemon tart, crumbs on her chin. Nina covered her mouth with her hand. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She looks happy." "She is," I said, voice shaking. "But we're in trouble." I told her everything: Paul's threats, the trust, the forged birth certificate, the court's potential power to unravel it all. And then I asked her the hardest question of all: "Will you help us?" She looked at the photo for a long time. Then looked at me. I gave her up to save her. I won't be the one who destroys her now. I exhaled. "Can you sign a statement?" I asked. "That you gave her to me, not to Janine? That you agreed to Edward's guardianship arrangement, believing I would raise her?" She nodded without hesitation. "Yes. But I want one thing in return." I tensed. She smiled sadly. "I want to meet her. Just once. I don't need her to call me anything. I just want to see her. No, she's okay. No, I didn't make a mistake." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You didn't." By the time we returned to Charleston, Victoria had already drafted the affidavit. Nina signed it 2 days later, voluntarily, publicly, with a notary present. Paul never saw it coming. And with that single document, the court confirmed that Lily's guardianship and trust were legally valid. No fraud. No loophole. No Paul. He'd lost. Again. But there was one final storm still building. Because Janine had found out Nina was alive. And she wasn't angry. She was terrified. Because if the world knew she faked her pregnancy, her entire reputation, her friends, her funding, her new corporate position would collapse. And Janine? She doesn't go down alone. The call came at midnight. Gracie answered first, half asleep, her voice groggy. But the moment I heard her gasp and drop the phone, I knew something was wrong. I took the receiver with shaking hands and heard Lily's voice, low, tight, terrified. "Grandma, she found me." My heart stopped. "Where are you?" I don't know. I was walking home from the bus stop after study group. A black car pulled up. I thought it was a rideshare. Mom got out. She said she wanted to talk. Just for a few minutes. That she was sorry. I didn't want to go, but she paused, voice breaking. She threatened to hurt Nina. My blood went cold. She said if I didn't come with her, she'd tell the press Nina sold me for drug money. That she'd make sure no court believed anything she signed. She said she'd ruin you. Said she'd sue the care home, sue Victoria, sue everyone. I didn't know what to do. She has me at a beach house. I think it's the one near Folly Point. I don't even have my phone, I'm calling from the caretaker's line. She just left to get champagne. I don't know what she's planning. But it's bad. I clenched the arm of my chair so hard the wood creaked. "Listen to me, Lily," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through me. "Stay near that phone. Don't eat or drink anything she brings you. I'm coming." I hung up and dialed Victoria with shaking fingers. "She took Lily," I said. Silence on the other end. "I want everything we have. Her arrest warrants. Her forged records. Her NDA violations. I want it packaged. Ready to go public." "You sure?" Victoria asked. "Because if we go scorched earth, there's no coming back. Janine's life will be over." I closed my eyes. She should have thought about that before abducting my granddaughter. Within the hour, we had her. Lily described a painting in the hallway, a shipwreck scene with gulls and a black horizon. I remembered that house. It was one of Edward's old client properties, long since sold but still in the family circle. Victoria traced the deed. We alerted the authorities. And Gracie drove us there before the police even got the keys in the ignition. When we arrived, Lily was on the porch, arms crossed, eyes wide, guarded by a confused caretaker who'd clearly been told she was on a healing trip with her mother. Janine was inside, pacing, red-eyed, ranting on the phone to someone about controlling the narrative. I walked right in. She turned. Froze. The silence between us was louder than any slap. "You're not her mother," I said. She laughed bitterly. "Neither are you." "Maybe not by blood," I said, pulling the notarized papers from my coat, "but legally, emotionally, spiritually, I am everything you never were." Janine's lip curled. "You think you can erase me? Rewrite history? You're an old woman playing God with paperwork." "No," I said. "I'm a woman cleaning up the damage you left behind." She stepped forward, eyes wild. "I made her. I chose her. Without me, she wouldn't even be yours. And without me," I whispered, "she'd have become you." Janine didn't move. But she looked scared. Because she saw what I held in my other hand, my phone. Already dialing a live stream. And I made sure she saw the title, Final Confession of Janine Marsh, the woman who bought a baby. She backed away. "You wouldn't." I stepped forward. "Try me." And then Lily stepped into the doorway. Calm. Fierce. Unshaking. "You always said I was a burden," she said to Janine. "But now I know I was your prop. Just something you used to keep your place in the family. In society. In control. I don't belong to you anymore." Janine cracked. She lunged. Gracie was faster. So were the police. They arrived just in time to cuff Janine as she screamed about conspiracies, about being framed, about her daughter turning on her. But the media didn't care about her story anymore. They cared about mine. By morning, the footage had gone viral. Charleston heiress arrested in secret adoption scandal. Eleanor Marsh protects granddaughter from kidnapping by own daughter. But I didn't watch the headlines that day. I watched Lily. She stood in my living room, staring out the window, arms crossed, still processing it all. I came up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry it came to this," I said. She nodded. "I'm not." She turned to face me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in her before, not fear, not pain, clarity. "You saved me," she said. "No," I whispered. "You saved me." When Janine's face hit the evening news, wild-haired, red-eyed, shouting about being set up, Paul went silent. Not out of guilt. No. Paul never felt guilt. He was quiet because he was calculating. Watching. Waiting. And then, just like I knew he would, he struck. 3 days after Janine's arrest, a YouTube video appeared under a verified news-style channel, The Eleanor Marsh Story, The Truth They Won't Tell You. Paul's voice narrated over stock footage and old photos of me, smiling at Edward, holding baby Lily, shaking hands at fundraisers. But the words? Pure poison. "She weaponized senility," he said smoothly. "She faked her fragility. Turned a family's concern into courtroom theater. And the girl she's protecting? Illegally adopted." That's right. No legal consent. Just a cash exchange in the dark. If anyone's guilty of fraud, it's Eleanor Marsh. My mother. The so-called matriarch of Charleston. He didn't show his face, but his fingerprints were all over it. The video racked up views fast. It was slick. Sensational. Just enough lies wrapped in truth to make people doubt. The worst kind of story. Lily saw it first. She came into my room, pale, phone shaking in her hand. "He's trying to ruin you," she whispered. Again. I watched it once. Only once. And when it ended, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up. "Get Victoria," I said. and tell her, it's time. You see, Paul thought he had the upper hand because he was speaking to the internet. But I had something far more powerful than likes or comments. I had a recording. From years ago. Back when Edward first confronted Paul about the missing funds. A private conversation in the sunroom of our house. Edward had installed a voice-activated recorder after Paul borrowed nearly $40,000 from one of our accounts and then claimed he was being set up by Janine. Edward never released it. But he saved it. And after his death, I found it, tucked inside a folder labeled "Use only if he goes too far." And oh, Paul had gone way too far. The recording began with Edward's voice, "Paul, I know what you did. I know where the money went. I know you forged your mother's name." Paul laughed. "You can't prove any of that. I don't need to prove it. I just need you to understand that if you keep going, if you ever touch Eleanor's name again, I will bury you with the truth." Then silence. And then Paul's voice, smug and deadly, "Good. Because one day, she'll be buried anyway. And when she is, I'll own everything." I took that recording. I took every document. Every timeline. Every photo and court file. And I compiled it into a 5-minute video titled, "What My Son Forgot I Recorded." And I posted it from my own verified channel. My face on camera. My voice steady, unwavering. I told the whole story. I didn't ask for sympathy. I demanded accountability. By dawn, my video had over 5 million views. Comments flooded in, "She's sharper than anyone in this family. Paul underestimated the wrong woman. Protect Eleanor at all costs." The media shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the elderly matriarch caught in family scandal. I was the woman who outwitted 2 children, a corrupt friend, and decades of buried secrets, all from a care home. Sponsors pulled out from Paul's ventures. His consultancy license was suspended pending investigation. The Preservation Trust issued a statement, "We stand with Mrs. Marsh. Her resilience is Charleston's pride." Paul tried to call me that night. I didn't answer. He texted me, "You've ruined everything." I texted back, "No. I've revealed it." And then, silence. Real silence. The kind that settles not just in a room, but in your bones. The war was over. And I'd won. Not with a scream. But with the truth. And in 2 days, I would walk into the courthouse, not to fight, but to sign the final guardianship papers. Because Lily? She was about to become mine. Fully. Legally. Forever. Before we begin, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, thank you. Truly. This story, my story, wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about voice. Mine. And maybe yours too. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me where you're from. And please, subscribe my channel so more people hear the truth when the world tries to silence them. Now, let me tell you how it ends. The courthouse smelled like old paper and newer justice. I wore pale ivory that day. A soft suit. No pearls. No makeup. I didn't need armor anymore. Lily held my hand. She wasn't a scared teenager anymore. She was a woman now, reborn in the wreckage, forged in the fire of family betrayal, and standing tall beside me. The courtroom was quiet. No press. No cameras. Just one judge. One pen. And a document titled, "Amended Guardianship and Transfer of Trust Authority to Eleanor May Marsh." The judge glanced up at me and smiled softly. "Are you ready, Mrs. Marsh?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "I've been ready since the day she first held my finger in the hospital and refused to let go." Lily blinked back tears. The judge nodded. "By the authority vested in this court and by the consent of the child's legal and biological representatives, I grant full and permanent guardianship to Eleanor Marsh." The trust shall remain under her discretion until the beneficiary turns 25. The gavel dropped. It was done. Just like that. But I wasn't finished. The next morning, I sat in the Whispering Cedars garden, tea in one hand, microphone in the other. The sun was gentle. The breeze warm. Gracie filmed from a soft distance. And I looked into the camera one last time. To the ones who doubted me, thank you. You taught me how loud silence can be when no one believes you. To the ones who tried to break me, thank you. You reminded me that strength doesn't come from muscles or money. It comes from standing up, over and over, when people would rather you stay sitting. To my daughter and my son, you made your choices. You wrote your stories with ink made of greed and control. I chose not to edit them. I chose to write mine. To Margot, my old friend. You reminded me that envy wears pearls and calls itself loyalty. I hope one day you remember what friendship was supposed to feel like. To Edward, wherever you are, thank you for protecting Lily when I didn't even know she needed protecting. I forgive your silence, because you handed me the truth in the end. And finally, to Lily, my legacy, my reason, my heart, you were born into a lie. But you turned it into a truth stronger than blood. You chose me. And I will choose you for the rest of my life. That video became my last public message. I didn't need applause. I didn't need another war. I had one what mattered. My voice. My name. My granddaughter. And peace. The kind of peace that comes after the storm has screamed itself empty. Janine remains under house arrest pending multiple charges. Paul vanished from Charleston. Last anyone heard, he was working in a furniture warehouse in Texas under an alias. Margot? She issued a public apology, then sold her home and disappeared from every social circle that once adored her. As for me? I still live at Whispering Cedars, by choice now, not by force. And every Sunday morning, Lily visits with lemon tarts, sits beside me on the garden bench, and we read old books out loud to the residents who once thought they'd die forgotten. Now, they see what happens when an old woman doesn't go quietly. She rewrites everything. The end. Thank you for being part of this story. If it moved you, made you think, or reminded you of your own strength, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. And before you go, where are you listening from? I'd love to know. Eleanor Marsh.